In the shadows whisper your demons settling in the road. Ancient voices call our names through the fire and the flames. Demons are real, feel the fear, memories first and sing your
Looking at the stars, bright lights in the sky. I ain't sure what it is, but it's making me fly. Spaceships zooming past, colors flashing by. I'm lost in the rhythm, feeling oh so high. UFOs and me, we're floating in the night, feeling airy free. Everything's just right. Alien friends wave, grooving side by side. In the cosmic dance, we just let it ride. Riding through the shadows, under the moon's gleam. Lost in the reggae beat, like a perfect dream. UFOs and me, we're floating in the night, feeling airy free. Everything's just right. Alien friends wave, grooving side by side. In the cosmic dance, we just let it ride. Riding through the shadows, under the moon's gleam. Lost in the reggae beat, like a perfect dream. UFOs and me, we're floating in the night, feeling airy free. Everything's just right.
Yeah. Yeah. Good morning. What an unbelievable way. I just, the AI for the music, even though I play like this, I've hand selected the few songs that we play for the intro for the podcast. So it's hilarious that every time I'm just like, man, so perfect for the theme of today. It's just, how did I magically, you know, come across and just make it so perfect? Oh, good morning, Chad. Good morning, everybody. This is a wonderful, wonderful, fantastic day. I am loving today. It's gonna be nice and sunny today. I got some things going on today. I hope you got some things going on today, man. Today is gonna be just a great day, and there's no just you gotta have a positive outlook in life. You gotta wake up every day and feel like you're ready and you're gonna grab life by the horns, rip those freaking horns off. You know what I'm saying? Like, don't just grab the bull by the horns, you rip those freaking horns right off, bro. Make life your bitch. You know what I'm saying? Like, you don't even gotta do nothing, just do everything. That's what I'm saying. You don't gotta do nothing. I mean, don't do nothing. You think we just sit around all day doing nothing, man? I'm busier than a motherfucker all day long, and I make myself busy. It's not that like I always have things going on. It's just like I make myself busy. I don't like to waste time and waste life and do all these things. I mean, life is literally about living. I mean, it's literally in the freaking word. And like you people sleep all day and all night and you go, I'm tired. Like, I don't give a shit. You're freaking tired. Like, today is the day. Get up, grab the bull by the horns, and rip those freaking horns off. You know what I'm saying? Like, just get going with it. All right. So, I hope y'all having a wonderful morning. Pivman with that repost. I appreciate you on that X post. If y'all ain't following on X, I make all the announcements there and post a lot of new stuff there. Gonna have some extra not stream content posting coming up in like I don't know, probably Sunday I'll do it because just because I as soon as we're done here, I'm posting the podcast, and then your boy is out for the day. So your boy is out for the day. So it's gonna be good. I'm telling you, you just gotta have that positive outlook in life, and everything will fall into place. But you can't just sit around and do nothing. You gotta grab life and go for it. You can't, nothing happens if you don't make that phone call. Nothing happens if you don't ask for it, if you don't work for it, if you don't do it. You ain't taking that girl on a date unless you ask her for her freaking number. You know what I'm saying? Like, and none of that is happening. Your knowledge of what we're talking about ain't happening if you ain't listening to the podcast, bro. And we are the podcast. So today's episode is titled The Ancient World. That wasn't good enough. That wasn't good enough. We got to do better than that. The Ancient World. My timing was off, but it was good enough. It was moderately good. So today I wanted to talk about the ancient world, because scientists have proven, well, I guess this kind of science they would be more like psychology and sociology, I guess. It would be more like, but these people who do these studies and these sleep patterns and brainwave patterns, when you talk to a person and you talk about the ancient world or ancient times, or when you ask a person what they mean by ancient or what they think ancient is, you get an answer of between like 500 and 1300 years ago. Well, 500 years ago, we already knew about the Americas. Yet we talk about that in our history books as recent history. 1,000 years ago, we were sitting there in little kingdoms, not doing shit, bickering amongst ourselves. And yet 500 years later, we're discovering new lands. 400 years later, we're flying to the moon. The difference in time is I wonder if the fan is making my microphone drop, like it's picking it up as like a noise. Interesting. And the So the ancient world is we need this like that. Yeah, there we go. So when you look at the ancient world and you're talking about um how should I put it? 1300 years ago, which was what, the 700s? I mean, ancient Rome had already been gone, fully gone for a few hundred years. You're talking about and Rome itself took a few hundred years to completely fall, to completely go away, to completely die off. So, you're sitting there and you think of the ancient world typically on average about 1300 years at a maximum. But when we talk about the ancient world, we're talking about minimum 2100 years ago, but in reality, we're talking about, 2100 to 4000 years ago. So like 2000 BC. But why do we talk about that as being the ancient time? Because that's where we start to have records that we could look back on. There are records that exist. There are other time things that exist, but they're either pushed into the realm of mythology or they're um not mythologized, but just either not known about or not, what's the word I'm grasping for? Um Not understood, maybe, is a way to say it, because we don't have all the information. It's not like we could look back at like how we can do with the stories of Jesus, for example, and then compare them to Roman records and Roman censuses and all these different things that existed at the time. So we know that when they talk about Herod and Pontius Pilate and all these guys in the story, we know that they existed because we have census data and we have, record keeping and all these things. But once you start to get past all of that, you start to delve into the world of fragmented record keeping, where we find small amounts of records for each different thing, or the records are all there but they've been pushed into the realm of religion. And because of that, it's not well known as what's fact and what's fiction, or what you're made to believe, I should say. And when you sit there and you read the religion, this is why, for example, it's so controversial for people like ancient astronaut theorists to read differently into religion, because in one sense um you have a religious perspective of it, and that's the truth because this is what you've believed for thousands of years. What So when you look at it, you're looking at it from a different perspective. But when you read into those things, you're also reinterpreting the belief from a new perspective, when it's not supposed to be your perspective. It's supposed to be the deity's perspective, whichever deity you're worshiping in that sense, in whichever example you're thinking of in your brain. You should be thinking of Christianity and Judaism, because that's kind of what I'm talking about in a way, in reference to. So you look at the ancient world from a religious perspective, and when you look at it past that, you start to view it from a whole new perspective. For example, everybody's seen Eric von Daniken's story about how he was in there with his Jesuit priests and reading the thing and looking up at the paintings on the church ceiling and whatever. I was in a similar situation. I remember I was in religious class, and we were sitting there reading from the Bible. Like if you're here in like America, a lot of times now, if you're like Catholic or whatever, they find like some local lady or guy or whatever, like a family person in the community to volunteer to teach you shit about the religion, even though they probably don't know shit themselves. And like today, I know more about religion than any of those people who taught me back then. And then they even still now today, and it's been like 20 years. Like, like, are you serious? So, like, you learn nothing over that time. So it's like when you look at um so I was sitting there, and I was looking at we were reading the book, and I remember these books are referencing 10,000 plus years ago. Not not like like the time of like for example like Judaism references times that were 5,000 plus years ago. So we're talking about the 3,000 BC to the 1300s BC. That's the time frame we're talking about in Judaism. In a lot of their texts, references about that time. And we have proven through modern archaeology that this actually is probably accurate, because if you read the Bible, Abraham came out of the city of Ur, which was the capital city of Sumer, which was the home of the Sumerians, which were the people who believed in the Anunnaki gods that were actually aliens from another planet, according to Zechariah Sitchin's translations. So they came out of the same thing. And we know that this is a fact because we now have archaeological evidence of the city, and we know then based on dating that it was around 5,000 years ago, which coincides with the time of the Bible is telling us. So right then and there, we can know that we can take some of these things. When you look at this, you realize that it's like without the archaeological evidence, the story of Abraham would have remained specifically and only religious. But now, because we know that the city was real, we can then interpret that at least parts of the story are real, like the leaving of the city, taking your local people, your tribe, the people you care for, your local community, and moving with them to a new place is not unheard of in the ancient world or in the modern world. Like, so you could literally do that. Like, what's the problem? You never heard of people packing up and moving? The only difference is they didn't have a U-Haul back then. So, like, you literally look at this as you could find it. It's the same thing, for example, with the city of Troy. You look at the city of Troy, and we all thought it was mythology, a story to tell us how to react morally because the Greeks believed in morals and righteousness and blah, blah, blah. Well, then we found the city of Troy, and guess what? It may be a story about morals and righteousness, um, but it's literally a story of also fact, historical fact. The city actually existed. There's evidences of battles there and all these other things and scorch marks, just like the story says about how the city was burned. So just one of my favorite quotes from historians is the ancient Greek um philosophers, like Plato and all these guys, aside from their mathematics, but when they were writing, they're really more like the world's first bloggers. Like they mixed fact with fiction with self-perception. It's not like they separated themselves and gave like an outside third person perspective of what was going on. It's like they put themselves in their own perspective and interpretations into the story, and wove it into a narrative that's mixed with fact and fiction. So while we know that the city of Troy was there, and we know that the thing, they go there, and supposedly the woman who captures their hearts is a demigod, a demigoddess. Well, right then and there, you could say, well, here's where we start to blend in the fact and fiction. Because why don't you just say that she was beautiful, bro? Like you gotta say like she was so beautiful, she was a divine demigoddess and whatever. Like why you gotta say that? You don't need to go to the extreme extent, unless of course, like according to ancient astronaut theory, you're talking about actual extraterrestrials and you only refer to them as gods because you didn't understand what they really were, which is a species that is different than us, yet somehow genetically similar. So you look at it and you say, well, what's going on here? So, oh, I never started Lumia for the thing. No wonder the edge, the emotes and the thing is not here. Bro, we should start that. Yo, I like the new Lumia. I totally forgot about that. I downloaded Lumia Stream and it's great. Update, maybe later. What does it say? There you go. Update maybe later. No, that's not true, Lumia. Um, so now that we have Lumia, we could probably get rid of Botrix too, which would be dope. Because it's just annoying. Um, so uh, so we find all this evidence, and yet you have to wonder what else is true. So you by one, and let me go back to what I was saying before about um how when I was reading the texts in religious class, and I was sitting there and I was thinking, I said to my teacher, neighbor lady, I says, you know this sounds like some of these fantasy books I'm reading. Like you're literally talking about a king and their armies in heavens and coming down to the earth. I mean, it literally sounds like a military complex and all these other things. Like what are we really talking about here? I was like, these sounds like these other beings are also gods, like you hear in polytheistic religions. It's just the only difference is we call them angels. And she's like, well, I prefer to think of them as angels, but you could read the book of Enoch if you want. Well, that was great because I read the fucking book of Enoch, and that just opened my mind to the world and to all the different studies, because Enoch specifically talks about meeting other beings, the angels, going into space, going into another ship, meeting with the All High God and getting detailed information about their military plans and conquests and all these other different things, and then going back to Earth. And it's really interesting because it's like, well, uh, you know, it reads like some of the best fantasy sci-fi literature you've ever read. I mean, it is fantastic. And yet there's a whole religion built around it. Look at the same thing in India. In the city of Dwarka was found, where we thought it was a mythological place, and then some underwater archaeologists went, read the book, said, oh, it describes the location right here. Well, let's look at a map. Oh, that location's underwater. Let's go hire a scuba team and go check it out. And then they hired a scuba team, checked it out, and they go, oh, look at this. Under the water here, there's all these ruins of a city. Oh my God, look, we found the city. Exactly what it says. But then you read into the book who ruled over this city. Shocker, a demigod. Oh my God. Shocker, right? And so you're getting into the blending of history and mythology into religion. Because you got to remember, is these people, even if I sit here and tell you exactly what it is, these people didn't understand the technology. Thinking about showing your phone to not your father or your grandfather, but try showing think about how you would explain your smartphone to an ancestor who lived in the 1800s or the 1700s. What about if you went back to the 1300s and showed them your cell phone, your great ancestor or whatever, and tried to explain that to them what it is? Think about how you would do that. What would they think it is? You tell them it's, for example, like I got like say I'm holding up my tablet, right? I say, oh, here's my tablet, and you look at it and it's made of metals, right? And you say, oh, well, because we have plastics and all these different compounds together, and you say, what is it made out of? And you say, oh, it's made of metals that's really hard, and if I hit it, it's hard as stone, it doesn't break. And over thousands of years, or the not understanding of what you're telling them, or both, it becomes the stone tablets, right? But really, I just showed you my phone. I just showed you my iPad and tried to explain it to you and showed you what it is and what it can do. And over years of misunderstanding and mistranslation, the metallic tablets that act like stone or as hard as stone and show images of the gods and of the heavens becomes the divine stone tablets. Thousands of years later, sometimes even immediately. And you hear about this all the time. Judaism and Moses coming down from Mount Sinai with the tablets is not the only religion that talks about it. In fact, the entire Sumerian literally took mud clay bricks and wrote in them and then hardened them into stone. You literally have a stone tablet. Like it's literally, so like you could literally draw conclusions that it's very simple to misunderstand what somebody is talking about, and then through the misinterpretation of language, like if we play that telephone game, by the time you get to the 10th person, the story is different. So you get all these different understandings and perspective. So the goal is to find out what is the real truth behind all these things. So when we talk about the ancient world, we are going to talk about 2,000 to 50,000 years ago. And once we get past 6,000 years ago, It's no longer just it's speculation and religious beliefs. That's it. You know, we've spoken about different the different beings that may or may not be there, and the different people's interpretations of them. For example, we have different, you look at like look at Greek and Roman and Norse culture, Celtic culture, all the same. It's all the same gods. You have a little different practices, different names for them for sure. A couple other different interpretations, but they're the same. You got a pantheon of gods who rule over the people with one ultra divine god at the top. Well, what are you talking about? Excuse me, Chad. You're talking about. I had to burp for a second. I'm so sorry. You're talking about the. I lost what I was saying. There was air in my trapped in my lungs, and I lost what I was saying. You're talking about when you're in the I want to delve into the ancient world. And we're gonna when I talk about that's why I was saying when we talk about the ancient world, and we're going to talk about between 2 to 50,000 years ago, that's what I talk about all the time. When I'm saying something ancient, I don't mean 500 years ago. I don't mean 1300 years ago. I mean 2,000 to 50,000 years ago. Because that, in my mind, is what is ancient. It may be very old to 1,300 years ago. It may be, extremely old, but that's not ancient. Ancient is the Egyptians, the Romans, the Celts who the Druids, the ancient Hindu, all these different things, the ancient Shinto religions of Japan. I mean, but religion of Japan, and their different beliefs and multiple gods and multiple things. I mean, it's absolutely fascinating to me. But that is the ancient world for me. And that's why I started talking about in the beginning about how people view typically ancient as being 500 to 1,300 years ago. Because for me, we're talking about thousands of years ago. I don't view 500 years ago as ancient, So, and the problem is, too, is we have this gap in history. We have better record keeping in ancient Rome still today than we do from 300 AD, 405, 700, 800 AD, 1100s even. We have better record keeping then than we did for that time period. Then, once we start to get into more of the end of the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, we have more and more accurate timekeeping, record keeping, because time doesn't exist. It's all your perspective. Record keeping. Because we're talking about, see, time exists as a measurement. So when I say time doesn't exist, I'm really talking about your perception of the flow of time. Your perception of the flow of time is what's the illusion. But time as a measurement exists, meaning even from, the world doesn't exist in like this fluid thing. Your mind takes little snippets and little snapshots, hundreds of snapshots a second, and puts them into like a flowing video form. And that's why you think you view the world this way. And that's what gives the illusion of the flow of time. It's because your brain puts them in order and creates a length of time frame. But what your brain is actually doing is measuring an event from the start to the end. So, that's why time definitely exists as a measurement, but the flow of time is what is the illusory perception. It's the illusion. And so, all right, that was a little tangent there. But, so I want to get into, a little bit deeper than that, though, because it pertains to our subject is very important. I've referenced a few times about how in the ancient world, in ancient astronaut theory, they some people say, not they, some people say that the alien gods, the extraterrestrials, came here possibly even as far back as 270 million years ago for the first time. 270 million years ago, the dinosaurs were still here, thriving. Okay. Oxygen in this planet as a percentage of one of the gases in the air was much more pronounced. I spoke about a few weeks ago about how I watched this documentary about the ancient world, during 100 million years ago, during the time of dinosaurs and larger plants and larger animals and larger insects even. And they did this really interesting study that the insects actually grow larger the more oxygen is present in the atmosphere, and they found out that they have this little vein in their things, and once they grow to a certain size, the vein gets cut off by their joints, and so they can't grow anymore because of their intake of oxygen. This is due to their exoskeleton and whatever. And so it was so interesting because then um they took these insects and they put them in, vacuum laboratories, and they literally grew to be, not like the size they were when the world was ancient, but much larger. So then they did the same thing. They increased the oxygen over time, and the more they increased the oxygen, the larger these insects grew. Now, the ancient world had way more oxygen, millions of years ago, had way more oxygen than it does now. Plants were huge, animals were huge, insects were huge, everything was massive. So imagine now, for just think about, for example, imagine in your mind you're an extraterrestrial and you come to this planet and you have thousands. I appreciate you with that shout out, high potential Tinker. The Tink. I just saw it now on my notifications. I don't know why I didn't see it before. Appreciate you. Yeah, so they so you're looking in when you're looking at imagine being an extraterrestrial. Imagine being a human. Forget being an extraterrestrial. I'm going to give you this example. Imagine being a human, and let's say we land on, Venus. Let's say we land on Venus. We get there, we get past the atmosphere, and which is thick, full of whatever. And you get there, and massive trees. The planet is huge, ruled by giant dinosaurs and massive insects and anything that wants to eat you and is bigger than you, and even the small things want to eat you. So imagine doing that, and you land on this planet. Imagine it's one of SpaceX's things, and you land on this planet, and you see all of this, and you say, wow, this world is incredible. we need to study everything we can learn about it. We need to learn about the atmosphere. We need to learn about the animals here because, from our perspective on the planet, it looked okay. Didn't look too great. You know, we have this cloudy atmosphere. But we could tell that the cloudy atmosphere harbored some sort of life. I appreciate you with that follow, Dark Abyss. I'm calling you Dark. And so they, again, literally, Lumia, what happened to my, I literally downloaded you because Botrick sucks and doesn't make the announcements of when there's a follow. It's supposed to pop up on the screen and say, hey, thanks for joining the war effort. I don't see it on the screen. Do you see it on the screen? Well, I appreciate you anyway. So, it's so imagine being one of the a human being and doing that. You get there and you see this. Well, from our perspective, it was totally different. So we need to understand it. Imagine flying to one of those other planets. What's that one that's what's that one that astronomers are saying is the mega Earth? Um, or one of the mega Earths, I should say, because they found a couple of them now. Galiso 42b or something. We got to look it up later. So look it up yourself also. Don't just take my word for it. You got to do your own research. Just because I'm smart doesn't mean you can't be smart too. And so, there's but anyway, so imagine going to that planet and you get there and it's just like your world. There's some nice water, some oxygen, you go for a swim. There's some fish you could eat, chop up, make some sushi, and you get there and but then there's massive dinosaurs ruling the world. There's massive, all these other creatures and stuff. And so you're like, wow, this world is similar to ours, but is totally different at the same time. Yet somehow we could live here and breathe here, and it's no different than our world. We don't need an oxygen mask. We don't need all of this. Let's sit here and study. And then you're here for, a few thousand years, maybe a few million years, maybe whatever. And you realize you're like, all right, but our plans have changed. We've now studied the planet. We've done all this thing. We're a spacefaring society. We're not killing ourselves with war anymore. We're on this other planet. We need to spread out our population. We need to have more kids. We need to do all of this. But this planet, not really doing it for us the right way. It's like a second home, but it's not our home. It's a foster home. We got to terraform the planet and make it better. How are we going to do that? There's 520 billion different dinosaurs on this planet. What are we going to do? Well, you remember way back in the 2024 or 23, what year was it? All those millions of years ago? When we used that new science technology to push that asteroid away from the planet so it didn't hurt us? Well, what if we do the reverse? What if we push an asteroid into this planet so it changes things? Let it cause a nuclear winter. Let it cause a mega impact. Let it destroy all these creatures, and we'll just pick up the pieces and move along. We got time. We ain't going nowhere. We got all these massive spaceships and everything. We could fly around. We got time. Whatever. And what's interesting too is that reminds me of Zachariah Sitchin's interpretation of the Great Flood event caused by Enlil and Anu and against Enki's desires. It was so interesting because one of Zachariah Sitchin's interpretations of the Great Flood was that The gods believed that because they were such a strong spacefaring civilization, that they were highly intelligent and did these things. He they believed that when the gods arrived there, they thought that, well, we can wipe out these people no problem because we've been surviving in space for millions of years. We got spaceships, we travel back and forth from our planet and to other planets. So, like, what's the big deal? No problem. But in Zachariah Sitchin's interpretation, once they went through with the flood, they realized that they were unprepared, that they didn't have anything. And so when the humans came back and were able to land on the world for the first time, they shared their food and their meat and their animals and they offered them up as sacrifices to the gods. What's interesting, also, I'll just add, is that human beings before this were forbidden to eat meat by the gods. And after the flood, when the gods were up in space, quote unquote, starving, according to Zachariah Sitchin's translations, they came down and they realized we weren't prepared. We've been too complacent in having these people worship us and sacrifice food to us. We might as we kind of semi doomed ourselves. But the humans, because all the vegetation was gone and lots of things were gone and many animals were gone, needed something to eat too. So the gods finally allowed the humans to read, to eat meat, but it was still considered to be that the blood was for the gods. Later on, other religions make sure that you drain the blood in specific ways so that you get less and less blood in your meat and in your other things. This goes for multiple different religions. I don't need to name one, there's tons of them. And, it's really interesting because if you think about it, humans, if you think about that, all of a sudden humans were vegetarians. You're telling me I was an omnivore? Or is that the right word? No. Herbivore. Thank you. You're telling me I was a herbivore before this? That all I did was eat salad and tomatoes and fruit? Fruit is really good, first of all. Let me tell you, I just bought some fire ass palm green grapes, bro. Oh my God. Oh my God, it was so good, bro. And I had these peaches the other day, bruh. So, when we keep going in the ancient world and in the ideas of the ancient gods, you look at these different stories and you realize that there's some sort of common thread binding them all together. So let's go back to our interpretation, right? Because you come to this planet and you decide you want to change things to make it better for you and your species. So you do lots of things. You change the world and you change your own species to fit, to terraform, whatever. What's really fantastic is, well, fantastic to think about, to consider, is why would they really have done such a thing? Let's let's play for example, the only reason you would do something to that extreme is either because you needed to for desperate reasons or because you're a psychological warrior society who just loves to destroy. There's no other in between. Because if you're thinking about it and you didn't need to live on the planet to terraform it to colonize in order to save yourself or save your species, you're committing, what's the word, xenocide? You destroy an entire planet. I mean, if you think about it, human beings, we just mentioned that the gods, then remember, we just mentioned that some of the beliefs are that the gods came here 270 million years ago. Now, if you look at it, the dinosaurs died out about 60, or began to die out, I should say, about 65 million years ago. That's over 100 million years. They were just chilling with dinosaurs, probably riding on their backs. Strap a harness to that shit, bro. I mean, it was like, what were they doing that whole time? Think about it. What would you do for 100 million years on a planet full of rampaging dinosaurs? Do they taste good? That's what I want to know. Does it taste like a nice freaking steak? Because I'll tell you right now, probably tastes like chicken since the chickens are descendants of the raptors and the T-Rex. Maybe take some T-Rex eggs, crack an egg, feed your family for a year. One egg. Why not? It's probably good. So, you should, so, so you sit there and you wonder what's going on. And then you take that number 65 million years ago. The first hominids only started appearing about 1 million years ago, a little less than that. In comparison, the first Homo sapiens only began to appear about 250,000 years ago. And yet, it's only about 50,000 years ago that we began having real conscious thought, real conquest, and expanding our territory and society. And we know this is true because the last of the hominids and Neanderthals died about 40, 50,000 years ago. In comparison, they say that the Great Flood happened about 13,000 years ago, and you can tell this by studying the Usella horizon and seeing that area. And so the interesting perception of that is that when you're looking at that time frame, is you realize there's massive gaps. There's massive gaps between 250,000 and 50,000 years ago. What happened for 200 freaking thousand years? That's what I want to know. This is the truth that we're trying to aim at. And right now, the only aspect you really have to gain light into some of these possible worlds, possible realities of our past is mythology and religious texts and all these things. And it's so hard to decipher the truth out of things, because you have to look at it and you say, because just like how we said in the beginning, with the city of Troy and the city of Dwarka and all these different, and the city of and Sumeria and all these other different places that we now know exist through archaeology. If we didn't have that archaeology, you would still be thinking that the city of and Sumeria was just a mythology. Yeah, it's real nice that all these people were living together 5,000 years ago and had advanced writing. And I know we kind of lost it a little bit. We had advanced rules of thought and all these different things. And then we lost it for a few thousand years and got it back. I mean, and you would have thought that was all mythology, just like the city of Atlantis. You would have thought that the Sumerians were probably just like the city of Atlantis, mythology, all these things. And yet, I recommend there's a good documentary out now that actually points to Atlantis as being I believe it was on the actual African continent. And it's really interesting because the um, it's really interesting because you have the city as being slightly underwater and having like these different canals and trenches encircling the city making rings, and you hear about it in Plato talking about the rings of Atlantis, and this is what he's referring to. Well, in this documentary, I think it's called Atlantis Found or something like that. I think it's on Max. It's definitely on History Vault. I think it's also on Max, HBO Max. Did they change it back to HBO Max? I don't even know, man. So it's so intriguing to think about it, and it it's you're looking at it, and they've studied like water levels at the time of what they think it was, and they raised all these possibilities because the area was slightly underwater, and it wasn't real. It was like it's like a valley that at the time when the water levels were higher would have been completely submerged, and all these different things. So it's possible again. You never know. I mean, in what's it? Is it I forget which Greek philosopher says it, but they say Atlantis was beyond the Straits of Gibraltar, which is the modern day what the I forget where it is exactly off the top of my head at the moment. But it's literally that's a real place today. Well, what's beyond that? I'll tell you what's beyond that. The rest of the freaking planet. Okay, so that's literally not really that good of a description. To just say, oh, it's somewhere out there in the world. Bruh, give me an actual description of where it could be. Like I took a rowboat there, and it took me 40 days and 40 nights to row there, but I eventually landed in Atlantis. Or I took a sailboat, and I was on the boat for a week and a half, and I was starving. We didn't bring enough supplies. Thank God I got there, and they had some delicious sushi for me to eat. Oh my God. And it's like, it's like, why can't you describe that? Why do you got to say, oh, it's somewhere out there in the planet? Bro, like that makes you not credible. Like it's obviously some BS nonsense you're talking about. But they do say that what they're talking about is 50,000 plus years ago when they're talking about the city of Atlantis. They're talking about pre flood times. They say Atlantis was already dead before the flood even happened. So, what is it, for example? What is all these different interpretations of the world? Some people, if you look at um what's it, the Brontes Phineas map, the one that shows Atlantis, I mean not Atlantis, my God, the one that shows Antarctica. I gotta adjust my seating. The one that shows Antarctica further up north and free of ice. Well, maybe it was. I mean, for all you know, the some sort of cataclysm happened and shifted the earth a little bit, or some sort of earthquake or movements of tectonic plates happened or whatever. For all you know, that's exactly what happened. And shifted the land around. And now Antarctica is underneath the water. Well, what if what if in Antarctica could have been Atlantis? I mean, if it was underneath, if it was water free all that time, and then is covered by ice and rising sea levels, Well, isn't that also being swallowed up by the water, by the waves? I mean, just because it's solid frozen water doesn't mean it's not still water. You know, it's ice, but it's still water. I mean, how do you not know that? You know, so like it could be, again, we're talking about interpretations of languages over thousands of years. Me telling you a story and you going to repeat it to your friend is not going to be the exact same thing that I said. Maybe closer, but the further down the line you get, the same thing with measuring time and history and all these things, because you get certain parts of it get lost over time. You know, we forgot that the city of Ur in Sumeria was an actual real place until archaeologists discovered it. You know, there's that other place where they, if you read the stories of, remember the Tower of Babel in Babylon, where they built this tower to rival the gods, and the gods didn't like it, and dispersed language among the people, so they couldn't unify. Well, yeah, maybe. I mean, but then they went and they found this ziggurat in Babylon. I forget exactly what the name of the ziggurat is called. You could look it up. And some people are interpreting it as being, you know, part of you know, as being that was the Tower of Babel because it's one of the biggest step pyramids that they found. Who knows? I mean, maybe they didn't even call it a tower. Maybe like the calling it the Tower of Babel was like, you know, I came from you know, New York, right? Or no, I come from somewhere in the Midwest of the United States where it's like mad rural, you know, and then I go all into New York and I'm looking at the you know, this building, and I say, wow, that skyscraper just towers above me, you know, and all of a sudden it's now that skyscraper is now a tower. And so I call my friend, and he says, dude, where are you? I'm trying to meet you. And you're like, dude, I'm standing in front of this tower, you know, and you're like, and he's like, well, what tower are you talking about? You know, what's your address? And he's like, address? I'm looking at this big building, you know, and you know, they don't know what it is, you know, because it's not what you perceive. You're from an outside perspective. So think about it being like, you know, I'm an Egyptian, right, for example, or I'm an ancient Greek, right, and I'm looking at it, and I go visit this city, and I see, wow, you know, we have these awesome temples, but we don't have anything big as this building right here. It towers into the sky, and I'm in the city of Babylon here, you know, and then over the years it becomes the Tower of Babylon or the Tower of Babel. But in reality, it may have just been a step pyramid, just like we see all over the world. And so, you know, it's so interesting, the this is why we're talking about the ancient world, because you get these misinterpretations of what's happening and what's going on. And so, and then you get these perception beliefs combined with it, religious beliefs combined with it, and all those things form a person's perception and opinion, which adds to the story and the narrative of the history. This is why I said one of my favorite quotes in the beginning is that the Greek philosophers were really more like the world's first bloggers, because they take the stories of the past and the history and they merge it with their own beliefs and their own interpretations and their own sense of what they think actually happened based on their studies. You know, it's not to say that they didn't go out and study and visit these places and do these things, but they didn't look at it from a impassive eye. They didn't look at it from an outside perspective. They looked at it from their own perspective and took that perspective into account when writing everything down and putting them in together. So it was And so that's why I love that quote, because it's so true. They literally mixed everything together. And, people say the same thing about ancient astronaut theory today, although a lot of people do actually go out and do their research. But, I say go out and do your research and make your own interpretations. If you listen to any of our past episodes, I talk about all the time how if you think extraterrestrials are here for any sort of benefit for humanity at all, you are kidding yourself, fool. Like, dead ass, bro. They are not here for us in any way, shape, or form. Not at all. And even if somehow what they do is help us, it it's really all about them still. For example, like, let's say the entire planet is going through a plague, right? And you go and you take your ship and you spray some chemical and it kills the plague, right? And the extraterrestrials just saved humanity. From our perspective, but from their perspective, they're like, no, we got to get rid of this virus, bro. We can't have this spread to our people and whatever, like like this planet, and we can't have it destroy this nice, pretty planet that we like to come visit and see its nice blue oceans and cloudy blue skies and all these cool birds. I mean, it's awesome. We don't want that going on. I like to come and take my annual vacations here. Like why would you think for any reason that they would do anything to help us? I mean, this is what I get, like, is so, there's only one person in every single ancient text that actually wants to help the humans. Literally, it's in Greek mythology, it's Prometheus. In in um in um uh why am I drawing the blank? In Sumerian religion, it's liter and mythology, it's literally Enki. So it's literally the same thing. There's one freaking guy. Everybody else is like, dude, F these people. I want it to be this way because it's all about us. It's all about our world and our interpretations. And it's so why would you think that they would be here for any of us? That's why it's so much more plausible that Zachariah Sitchin is right that they originally made hominids on this planet. Maybe not us Homo sapiens, but hominids on this planet as a slave species to do the work that they wanted to do, that they didn't want to do. Of course they would do that. Maybe it was too expensive to get the metals and keep making more and more robots and replacement parts. Let's just make a new species and let them breed together and make new more and more slaves, and we'll convince them that they're actually worshiping us gods, and they'll give us offerings of food and gold and all these things that we need, and well, why not? And then, because they're millions of years more advanced than us, and they have this whole science team headed up by Enki, a whole science division, a whole bunch of them working together, what do? They keep refining the process. And then they say, well, gee, how are we going to make it better? Well, I got a great idea. Let's make, like, 10, 12, 15 different hominid species, sit them around the planet, put them in different areas, and we'll see which one makes it in the end. Well, guess what, bro? This is why we have no other hominids on the planet who exist besides Homo sapiens right now. Because either they killed off each other before Homo sapiens existed, or mated with each other, or both. And then when we got here, Homo sapiens, we either mated with them or killed them off, or both. Like, there's no in between. That's what happened to all of them. They didn't just, like, starve in one area because they couldn't grow corn and thrive in one area because they had steak to eat. I mean, it was just like it was like a mix of different things, and they put them together. So could that be what might have happened? Well, it's way more plausible than to say, oh, the alien gods created us because they love us. They want us to feel safe and welcome in the universe and in space, and they want us to explore and go to their home planet. Bullshit, bro. They literally sit here and watch us battle with each other all day. Imagine like we go to another planet and now we're armed with like laser cannons and space guns and Tesla death beams and nuclear bombs and all this crazy shit. And we go to another planet and they think that we're gonna be friendly. You're out of your friggin' mind, bro. And then you're talking that but yet you believe that these extraterrestrials coming here would be friendly to us. You're out of your mind. You are so crazy. They are not here for us at all. Who cares, bro? They are literally here because of some sort of conquering conquest and desire and nothing more. Like, whatever they're doing and their plans have literally no benefit to us. Maybe the benefit is there, but it would be nothing more of a side benefit from their perspective. That we survive and thrive is literally just more beneficial to them. It has nothing to do with anything. Think of a cattle farmer. If your cattle is healthy and nice and makes nice steaks and whatever, then that's great for you because you could sell that cattle for more money and then you could feed your own family and your family will eat well and they can have a thriving life. You know, so literally the cow being healthy and everything is literally a benefit to the cow, but in your perspective it's only beneficial to you. The cow is just cattle, it's just an animal. It would be the same thing for them to think to us, bro. We're literally just some sort of animal species. Who cares if we're intelligent and able to talk? They've been around for millions of years. So who cares about any of that? So these beings are not here for your benefit. They're here for them. And believe me, with some of the shit I've seen, bro, they're here. Telling you, bro. I don't just read these texts, bro. I've seen lots of shit, bro. You guys gotta look up at the sky. I'm telling you, bro. It is nuts. They are everywhere. All over the place, dude. Sometimes I'd be sitting there and I'm watching like what I think is like a star, and I'm just like, wow, that's like a really bright star. Like, obviously it's far away, so like it like blends in, with the other stars. And I'm like, oh, like that star is like kind of bright. I'm like, is that like a planet? Like what is that? Is that like a closer star? Whatever. And then all of a sudden, boom, zips away. And I'm like, whoa, that was not a star, bro. That was crazy. Or it'll move locations. Like you guys gotta look at the freaking sky, bro. That shit is nuts. Especially at night, bro. Go on a vacation to the Midwest and lay there and look up at the sky, and I'm telling you, you are gonna see some shit, bro. It is nuts. And what's so crazy is that it's so prevalent, and all you gotta do to ignore it is keep your damn head down. I mean, it's literally that prevalent and yet that easy to ignore. And that's the point of me bringing up looking at the sky, is because it's so simple to ignore the fact right in front of you just by not looking at it. And that right then and there proves the perspectives of all these other things and the gods being beneficial to us or living here as all being, you know, correct, but not being beneficial to us. That's not correct. But the the interpretations of all these things is because from your perspective, all you have to do is look down. And this is why we don't have accurate histories, and this is why it's not good for the histories to be melded with your fact and your religious beliefs and all these things, is because of the fact that it all you have to do is look down and the truth is hidden from you. All you have to do is put blinders on and look at the world through your own perspective, and the truth is hidden from you. You understand what I'm saying? Like, you think that the aliens being here is beneficial to us is like putting sunglasses on in a dark room. You ain't gonna see shit. You're blind as a bat. You know, it's literally it's fantasy nonsense. You know, so you gotta look at things through through a non objective perspective. Obviously, it's good to have objectives and goals to reach and things, but when you're researching things, you gotta look at things from a not self perspective. You got to look at things from an outside, a third person perspective, and you got to look at it and you got to say, listen, I understand that this is what I believe and what I see on a daily basis. Now tell me what you believe. See what you've seen. Get it all down. And then once you're done compiling all the information, then you could literally go and say, okay, now we could add our interpretation into it. Now we could understand it because you've gathered the information. You've made your unbiased observations. You've done your research. You've read your text. You've done all these things. And now it's time to add your opinion into it. Don't just look at something for 5 seconds and add your opinion into it right away. I don't give a shit what you say then. You got to look at things for a long time, you know? So let's get back to our conversation. We went on a little tangent there, but a necessary tangent. We're doing the weave, you know? So I want to get back to more talks about the ancient world, though, because this is very important. You know, thousands of years ago, the world looked very different. Again, oxygen levels were different, you know, different chemicals in the atmosphere, or different percentages of them, I should say. You know, land masses were different, water levels were different. Everybody was, you know, people looked different. In fact, one of my favorite things to read about is if you look at Greek mythology and culture, one of the things that Zeus constantly says is he refers to the human beings as the black-headed children or the black-headed people. And what's so interesting about that is if you read into it, what it says is that every single person had like a almost slightly colorless gray skin, and we all had black hair and blue eyes. Every single person had black hair and blue eyes and lightly gray skin, less pink, less of a pigmentation, you know, it was more lightly gray. So if you read that interpretation, that's very interesting, because if you then look at other texts, like for example, the story of Noah, when Noah is born, his skin is much lighter, more fairer, you know, has more pigmentation to it. His eyes are literally glowing. Well, if you had, you know, bigger pupils and different eyes going on, and then all of a sudden you had more whites of your eyes being shown or something like that, or the comparison of it off of the lighter skin versus the darker skin that people were said to have had, wouldn't that be an interpretation of glowing? So how would he get the different skin and hair color? I mean, is that like some sort of mutation? Are we talking about a genetic mutation that led towards a beneficial aspect to humanity that allowed us to have more pigmented skin, maybe different kind of eyes to see? Who really knows? I mean, maybe, and then people, the ancient astronaut theorists, look at these stories of Noah and having all these different things, and then Noah being the one who was the only survivor, so to speak, or one of the few who lived on the boat, and then the rest of humanity spawned from him. What are we talking about here? We're talking about genetic breeding, people. This is exactly what we're talking about. We're literally talking about a species of a person who literally either naturally or by some outside force mutated, became different, and somehow that mutation spread amongst the species as a beneficial mutation, because we know that there are beneficial mutations all over the planet. These happen all the time, especially even in our own modern society. We have, for example, you ever see those mutations of people that are born with tails again? Like we know that hominids, we humans, at one point in our ancient history, we had a tail, just like our monkey descendants. We had a tail. And so scientists have had to say, well, this is a lost genetic trait coming back into the forefront as a mutation of get so you get like a tail as mutation. Well, it doesn't really do anything. So that's not a beneficial mutation. Like being born like with like, let's say like you were born with a I don't know, I'm struggling for something that was unbeneficial, like a physical deformity or something like that. Let's just say, right? Well, that would not be considered in scientific terms a beneficial mutation. It was caused by a mutation, not by something that happened like an injury or something. Um, but it was, but like a beneficial mutation would be, let's say, I didn't have 5 fingers and toes on each limb, but I had 6. And that allowed me to, climb mountains easier or run faster, or I had better balance and, was able to, be a better martial artist or something like that. Well, that would be an example of a beneficial mutation where it helped you in your life and in your thing. And some of these beneficial mutations are passed down among species. We know that this happens. What's interesting too, a little another tangent side note, is I was watching this other thing that I've seen a few times, and I was doing some more research into it. And it's so interesting how, a lot of viruses actually cause beneficial mutations in some species, and there's actually some bees actually have some of these viruses in them that allows them to, it like compels them to want to go more and more to each plant and the species and get more of this thing. It's beneficial to the bee because it it literally keeps them sustained. It keeps their bellies full because they're literally eating all this nectar. It's beneficial to the plant because the plant seed is literally spreading more and more because you're visiting more and more plants. And then it's also beneficial to the virus because the virus spreads itself out among all the pollen and dander that you're spreading as well. So that's a modern day example, and this is true fact. I forget exactly what the virus is called, but it's a true fact. And they literally, this is a beneficial mutation. So it would be it would be beneficial to these creatures to have this sort of thing. So just because in the ancient world these gods did things, Enki created people, helped them survive the flood, whatever, continuing on with the stories, just because it was beneficial to us also doesn't mean that that was the goal. It could just be a side effect, because with the bees in that example, the bees and the plants are benefiting from the virus, but that's not the goal of the virus. The goal of the virus is to spread itself. So it wants to spread itself out into more and more bees. And so, in order to do that, it compels the bee to keep on going and pushing itself to continue spreading along that. So, while it may also be beneficial to the plant and beneficial to the bees, the ultimate goal of it is to be beneficial to the virus and nothing else. So it's just like what these ancient astronaut species would be doing, is they would be here for their benefit, whether to colonize, whether to study scientifically, whether to do anything. To think that it would be for our benefit is foolish. If anything, that's just a side benefit. So but when we look at because when you look at these interpretations of these stories of the ancient world, the the Judeo-Christian Islam God is not really a nice guy, bro. He is not nice at all. Read these stories. It literally goes out. He sends plagues after people. Read the story of the Exodus. And when they try to leave of Egypt at first, and they're not allowed to, what does God do? He poisons people. He kills innocent babies and children in their sleep. I mean, does that sound like a loving God to you? Are you out of your damn mind? When I think of loving God, I think of a God who would rather be passive and non-violent, because they love us so much and we're their creation. And this is what the Catholic Church teaches. If you go to the Pope and you talk to your local priest or all these things, what do they say? God is all omnipotent. He loves you. He loves us. He loves us because we are of him. We are his creation. But then you read the freaking text, and that's not what it says at all. It doesn't say any of that shit. That is literally your interpretation because you want to somehow feel good about your life and feel less shitty about the situation. Get over it, bro. This is why Buddhism makes more friggin' sense. Life is suffering. Get the fucking fuck over it. Like literally, it's suffering. Get over it. Stop wallowing in this woe is me nonsense. It's BS. Like literally, it's nonsense, dude. It's all your perception that God would be there. Read the friggin' books. God is not a nice guy. He kills children, he kills plagues, he sends armies against each other, he manipulates people to in order so that they fight amongst themselves. I mean, he literally took, if you read the story of the Bible, and just like I mentioned before with the story of the Tower of the Babel and God spreading language among the people, well, guess what? That doesn't sound very nice to me. I mean, literally, you literally spread language, and now for the next 50,000 years, we've been fighting with each other. How does that sound nice and loving and caring to you? I mean, if anything, I would unify your language so we could understand each other better, so we don't have to go through all this interpretation nonsense, this explanation, this language translation, whether literally translating language or translating it in your brain, and what I mean interpreting it in your brain. Well, that's literally the opposite of what should be being done. Get over it, bro. Life is suffering. The whole world is suffering. Everybody suffers. Get over it. Life is not that crazy. Life is actually pretty beautiful. I'm a genuinely happy person. I love to live life all the time. I love to do things. That's why I stay steady busy because I just love to do things and experience the world and meet people and talk to them. So nice. But you know, it's just it's just so it's just so baffling because you read these stories and then you tell your people something different. It's like, oh, he did that. God dispersed our language to teach us a lesson and of humility that God is the ultimate one, and we shouldn't aspire to be equal to God, but we should aspire to be as like Him as we possibly can, or some bullshit like that. Like, like, bro, that makes no sense, dog. Like, what are you talking about? So, um, I went on another tangent there. We're doing the weave because it all makes sense. It all interweaves together. It's all interwoven in the story of the narrative of today's of talk of the ancient world. Because it's so interesting too, and the ancient world. When you think of the ancient world, you think of like communications not being like today, where everything's instant. I pick up my phone and I make a phone call, all of that. Um, but somehow news spread. News spread. People knew the deals. You remember learning in history class with Lexington and Concord, the shot heard round the world. Well, news of that's a great metaphor and a modern day example of how we can prove that rumor and news travels faster somehow than actually spreading the news. Because when after all that happened and revolution started happening here in the Americas and we started spreading the word, we actually found instances where people already had knew of it. And some people even figured out examples of where not only did they know about it beforehand, but it was actually their perception that allowed them to believe that they knew about the revolution beforehand. When in reality, what they had heard was the past few decades of grumbling Americans complaining about taxes and all these things and their unfair treatment and all that spreading among the news. And then these people would read that and they would say, gee, things are getting real bad over there. All it needs is that one spark. All it needs is that one thing to cause it, and you're going to have a full fledged riot, a full fledged war, a full fledged revolution on your hands. And then later, when you hear about the shot heard around the world, that one spark that started everything up, literally your brain psychologically references what you were already thinking and blends them together into the perception of you already knew that the revolution was happening. But in reality, you've been taking this little microcosm of information. I remember watching this. Your brain is taking this microcosm of information and putting it into a narrative. Remember, at the beginning or towards the beginning of today, I talked about. Excuse me, Chad. I talked about how your time doesn't exist, but it exists as a measurement because what you're doing is you don't actually see things in a flowing video format. Your mind is taking snapshot images and audio files that it's receiving and blending them together to create like a video, a movie, and that's what you think you're seeing. That blending together is what creates the perspective that time is flowing. But in reality, what you're doing is your brain is measuring the start and the end of the event. and it has little measurements of between images of how long there was a microsecond between when the mouth opened and there was another microsecond between when the mouth closed, and then we line that up with the audio file that your ears heard, and we put it together, and then you see out of your eyes me talking and my mouth moving, or anybody talking and their mouth moving. But that's just the narrative that your mind put together for you. The same sort of way. And the thing, your brain took little bits of information and flowed it into a narrative. This is how you get rumor, and this is how you get rumor to be so believable. And it formed a narrative for you to latch onto. And in some cases, it could even give you the perspective of that you heard or knew something before you even heard it or it happened. Super interesting, right? So then you go and you wonder, what's this notification? Um you wonder, um what is what is going through a person's head, because if you knew what was going through the person's head, it'd be the same thing as you, and we would all just be androids capable of self autonomy but not really autonomous thought. Well, that would be that, but in the reality, we don't have that. We have people's inside perceptions and perspective, and the only way to get it out is to voice it out. And so that then there creates word of mouth and more perception. It was so interesting because I think it was Michio Kaku I was watching, who was talking about the brain being like they thought like the brain was just like a data storage center. And then they started doing this work on studying the brain, over a few decades. And they realized that the brain is not really a data storage center. It's more like a learning machine. And it's really interesting because if you think about it, that's 100% accurate. Because when you're a child and a baby, you have to learn to walk. You have to even learn to crawl first. You have to learn how to eat food. You have to learn how to blow your nose. You have to learn how to tie your shoes, brush your teeth. And then later, as you get older, this becomes background information that you need to know. You now know how to walk, so getting up and walking is a a psychological thing that you don't even think about. It's subconscious now. Yet at one point in your life, you had to learn how to do it. That's the point. The brain is a learning machine. When we're children, we run around, we jump, you bump into everything, and you literally continue on. And then later on, when you get older, you don't bump into the wall anymore because you know it's there. Your brain has learned that that wall is there and puts it into the back of your subconscious, and it just becomes part of your everyday thing. You know to turn the corner because you've done it 1,000 times. You know to expect that the corner is there. So your brain knows what to do. It's a learning machine. And then as you get older, it's so interesting because you switch from learning to acting upon what you've already learned. I think that's one of the crucial differences as to being a child and being a mature adult. Is when you're a child, you're constantly running around bumping into things to learn the world. You're throwing yourself into the experience to learn the world, whereas as an adult, you're taking from your past experience and using that to shape your future. I which is such an interesting perspective. I got to get the book I read that off of, and not exactly quoted from, but the concept of it, and I got to figure out which book that was, and I'll get that for you so you can look it up. Probably put it in the Discord or something, or post it on X. And so it's so fascinating. Man, we got on lots of tangents. But I love going on tangents. I mean, it's the whole point because it's not pointless tangents. There's a point to everything. We do the weave. You have to have more information. Just me telling you something is not enough information for your brain to understand and or to believe it. Just me telling you is not enough. You have to go on. You need background information. You need references. You need all these different things. So it's extremely important. Now, I want to keep on going back to the ancient world because we only have like 20 minutes left of the show, and then I have to go today. And it's just, how do I want to put it? Let's see. Let's see where to start. I know where to start. There was a time where in the ancient world, the gods lived among the mortals, lived among men. And by men, we just mean hominids, Homo sapiens. And there was a time where these gods lived among us. And they had names like Odin, Zeus, Lucifer, Quetzalcoatl, Amaterasu, Shiva, Rama, and on and on and on. And these gods lived among us and shaped every facet of our lives, not just in worship, but in everything we did, taught us how to believe and understand the world around us. This was their point, their perspective, they said. Well, I don't know how you're going to do that, but I'll tell you this. It's so it's so fast. So, these I'm trying to think of how to continue what I'm trying to say is these gods all lived among each other and among here, fought with each other and fought against us and used us to fight with them. There was the time when the gods ruled above us, and then, not just in Sumerian, but in many texts, it was the time came for the gods to allow us to rule. That means that they thought of us as a mature society at some point. Because they believed that rule was only for the divine gods. It was only for those who came from the true planet and whatever. It was only those who came from the bright star, as they said in some cultures. And so the changing of physical gods ruling to mortal beings being the ones in charge and ruling over their own lives and their own destiny is like another it's like another growth spurt. It's like another maturing. It's like they finally believed that we were able to do things because we were mature adults, not just stupid kids running around and bumping into each other. Obviously, they were hella wrong. Okay. We are all stupid adults just running around bumping into each other, just like kids. Of course, I mean, not all of us, but 98% of the population on the planet is just grown-up children bumping into each other, still trying to learn. So, it's, but, the the point of mentioning that is because these gods literally are stated to have lived here and then allowed human beings to rule over each other. And also, around the same time, they allowed human beings to eat meat and food and all these things that were not vegetables and herbs and whatever, herbivores. It's they allowed to do all these things. So you literally have a combination of of different things happening at the same time throughout the ancient world. Multiple evidences, not evidences, multiple examples. So one of the more interesting factors too about the ancient world, forget about just the gods being here, but people were different. You besides the fact that Zeus called them the gray-headed children, and he wasn't the only one, the black-headed children, and he wasn't the only one who called them that. And yet, but what was so different about these people? Ancient astronaut theorists call these people Homo sapiens, and I don't know why. I mean, I'm pretty sure I could have thought of 100 million different better terms, but they call the modern people Homo sapien sapiens. Like I'm pretty sure I could have thought of 100 million different better terms than just repeating the same word twice. But oh well, that's what they did. So they called it that, and it's because they point to the changes in human beings going from the black-headed children to having different looks, different skin pigments, different hairstyles, and it's not just because you come from a geographically different area. Of course, it is definitely that, but it's not just because you come from a geographically different area. It's also because something happened in your DNA to change. Now you got to wonder too. We know today that eating meat is great for our brain health, nutrition. We know that eating meat, and not just eating meat, but cooking our meat is is what gave us more intelligence and better brain size. Oh my God, excuse me. Why am I a hiccup? And it gave us more intelligence and brain size because it allowed for more nutrition to get in. Wouldn't that have also changed us completely? I mean, it may even change. I don't know if it would change our like pigmentation of our skin necessarily, but like it would definitely change the perspective of walking around like a baby to becoming a more conscious civilization. It would definitely change that perspective because you would look at it as being not just something that an outside force intervened in. It could also be simply because we started to eat meat and develop and cook it and get better nutrients for our bodies, that we weren't just we weren't just like we weren't these gray skinned people because we were able to get more of the nutrients. And for all we know, we might find out 1,000 years from now that there was actually some sort of virus that attached itself to the meat, and because we started eating meat, absorbed into our bodies and was one of those beneficial mutations that ended up helping us along the way in the world, and we didn't even know it until a few thousand years later because of scientific evidence. Chat, this conversation can literally go on for hundreds of more hours. But unfortunately, we are reaching our 2 hour time limit, self-imposed time limit for the podcast. Much love y'all today for coming in and chilling and chatting. Appreciate y'all with the follows, likes, and retweets and all of that. It really means a lot, truly. And so I appreciate you doing and chilling and chatting, or not chatting and just chilling. It's all your prerogative and your perspective, and there's only much love for all of it. So appreciate y'all. Remember, if you missed any part of the podcast, I post to all podcasting platforms. Um, so just go out there and catch up and listen to old episodes. Do what you want to do. Follow on X for up to the minute posts and news, and if there's a stream cancellation and all of that, and let you know. And we'll be back tomorrow at 2:30 Eastern time for the Sunday sauce. I appreciate y'all. Much love. We outie. Peace. Have a wonderful, wonderful day and week. Much love.
We